ask me?" "Well, you attend to your dinner," said Sir Mulberry, "and don't mind Miss Nickleby and me, for we shall prove very indifferent company, I dare say." "I wish you'd interfere here, Nickleby," said Lord Frederick. "What's the matter, my lord?" demanded Ralph from the bottom of the table, where he was supported by Messrs Pyke and Pluck. "This fellow Hawk is monopolising your niece," said Lord Frederick. "He has a tolerable share of everything that you lay claim to, my lord," said Ralph with a sneer. "Gad, so he has," replied the young man. "Deyvle take me if I know which is master in my house, he or I." "I know," muttered Ralph. "I think I shall cut him off with a shilling," said the young nobleman jocosely. "No, no, curse it," said Sir Mulberry. "When you come to the shilling, the last shilling, I'll cut you fast enough. But till then I'll never leave you. You may take your oath of it." This sally, which was strictly founded on fact, was received with a general roar, above which was plainly distinguishable the laughter of Mr. Pyke and Mr. Pluck, who were evidently Sir Mulberry's toads in ordinary. Indeed, it was not difficult to see that the majority of the company preyed upon the unfortunate young lord, who, weak and silly as he was, appeared by far the least vicious of the party. Sir Mulberry Hawk was remarkable for his tact in ruining, by himself and his creatures, young gentlemen of fortune, a genteel and elegant profession of which he had undoubtedly gained the head. With all the boldness of an original genius, he had struck out an entirely new course of treatment, quite opposed to the usual method, his custom being, when he had gained the ascendancy over those he took in hand, rather to keep them down than to give them their own way, and to exercise his vivacity upon them openly and without reserve. Thus he made them butts in a double sense, and while he emptied them with great address, caused them to ring with sundry well administered taps for the diversion of society. The dinner was as remarkable for the splendour and completeness of its appointments as the mansion itself, and the company were remarkable for doing it ample justice, in which respect Messrs Pyke and Pluck particularly signalised themselves, these two gentlemen eating of every dish and drinking of every bottle, with a capacity and perseverance truly astonishing. They were remarkably fresh too, notwithstanding their great exertions, for, on the appearance of the dessert, they broke out again as if nothing serious had taken place since breakfast. "Well," said Lord Frederick, sipping his first glass of port, "if this is a discounting dinner, all I have to say is, Deyvle take me, if it wouldn't be a good plan to get discount every day." "You'll have plenty of it in your time," returned Sir Mulberry Hawk. "Nickleby will tell you that." "What do you say, Nickleby?" inquired the young man. "Am I to be a good customer?" "It depends entirely on circumstances, my lord," replied Ralph. "On your lordship's circumstances," interposed Colonel Chowser of the militia and the racecourses. The gallant colonel glanced at Messrs Pyke and Pluck as if he thought they ought to laugh at his joke, but those gentlemen, being only engaged to laugh for Sir Mulberry Hawk, were, to his signal discomfiture, as grave as a pair of undertakers. To add to his defeat, Sir Mulberry, considering any such efforts an invasion of his peculiar privilege, eyed the offender steadily through his glass, as if astonished at his presumption, and audibly stated his impression that it was an infernal liberty, which, being a hint to Lord Frederick, he put up HIS glass, and surveyed the object of censure as if he were some extraordinary wild animal, then exhibiting for the first time. As a matter of course, Messrs Pyke and Pluck stared at the individual whom Sir Mulberry Hawk stared at. So, the poor colonel, to hide his confusion, was reduced to the necessity of holding his port before his right eye, and affecting to scrutinise its colour with the most lively interest. All this while, Kate had sat as silently as she could, scarcely daring to raise her eyes, lest they should encounter the admiring gaze of Lord Frederick Verisopht, or, what was still more embarrassing, the bold looks of his friend Sir Mulberry. The latter gentleman was obliging enough to direct general attention towards her. "Here's Miss Nickleby," observed Sir Mulberry, "wondering why the deuce somebody doesn't make love to her." "No, indeed," said Kate, looking hastily up. "I—" and then she stopped, feeling it would have been better to have said nothing at all. "I'll hold any man £50," said Sir Mulberry, "that Miss Nickleby can't look in my face and tell me she wasn't thinking so." "Done!" cried the noble gull. "Within 10 minutes." "Done!" responded Sir Mulberry. The money was produced on both sides, and the Honourable Mr. Snobb was elected to the double office of stakeholder and timekeeper. "Pray," said Kate in great confusion, while these preliminaries were in the course of completion, "pray do not make me the subject of any bets. Uncle, I cannot really." "Why not, my dear?" replied Ralph, in whose grating voice, however, there was an unusual huskiness, as though he spoke unwillingly, and would rather that the proposition had not been broached. "It's done in a moment. There's nothing in it. If the gentlemen insist on it—" "I don't insist on it," cried Sir Mulberry, with a loud laugh. "That is, I by no means insist upon Miss Nickleby's making the denial, for if she does, I lose. But I shall be glad to see her bright eyes, especially as she favours the mahogany so much." "So she does, and it's too bad of you, Miss Nickleby," said the noble youth. "Quite cruel," said Mr. Pyke. "Horrid cruel," said Mr. Pluck. "I don't care if I do lose," said Sir Mulberry, "for one tolerable look of Miss Nickleby's eyes is worth double the money." "More," said Mr. Pyke. "Far more," said Mr. Pluck. "How goes the enemy, Snob?" asked Sir Mulberry Hawk. 4 minutes gone. "Bravo!" "Won't you make one effort for me, Miss Nickleby?" asked Lord Frederick, after a short interval. "You needn't trouble yourself to inquire, my buck," said Sir Mulberry. "Miss Nickleby and I understand each other. She declares on my side, and shows her taste. You haven't a chance, old fellow. Time, Snob?" 8 minutes gone. "Get the money ready," said Sir Mulberry. "You'll soon hand over." "Ha, ha, ha, ha!" laughed Mr. Pyke. Mr. Pluck, who always came second, and topped his companion if he could, screamed outright. The poor girl, who was so overwhelmed with confusion that she scarcely knew what she did, had determined to remain perfectly quiet, but fearing that by so doing she might seem to countenance Sir Mulberry's boast, which had been uttered with great coarseness and vulgarity of manner, raised her eyes and looked him in the face. There was something so odious, so insolent, so repulsive in the look which met her, that without the power to stammer forth a syllable, she rose and hurried from the room. She restrained her tears by a great effort until she was alone upstairs, and then gave them vent. "Capital!" cried Sir Mulberry Hawk, putting the stakes in his pocket. "That's a girl of spirit, and we'll drink her health." It is needless to say that Pyke and Company responded with great warmth of manner to this proposal, or that the toast was drunk with many little insinuations from the firm relative to the completeness of Sir Mulberry's conquest. Ralph, who, while the attention of the other guests was attracted to the principals in the preceding scene, had eyed them like a wolf, appeared to breathe more freely now his niece was gone. The decanters passing quickly round, he leaned back in his chair, and turned his eyes from speaker to speaker as they warmed with wine, with looks that seemed to search their hearts, and lay bare for his distempered sport every idle thought within them. Meanwhile, Kate, left wholly to herself, had in some degree recovered her composure. She had learnt from a female attendant that her uncle wished to see her before she left, and had also gleaned the satisfactory intelligence that the gentlemen would take coffee at table. The prospect of seeing them no more contributed greatly to calm her agitation, and taking up a book, she composed herself to read. She started sometimes when the sudden opening of the dining room door let loose a wild shout of noisy revelry, and more than once rose in great alarm as a fancied footstep on the staircase impressed her with the fear that some stray member of the party was returning alone. Nothing occurring, however,